The Amnesty creation myth, as told by the founder of Amnesty in 1983, was that he read an article about two Portuguese students who were arrested for toasting to freedom in a Lisbon bar. Now, we've never been able to find those students, but it is a legend that has stuck within Amnesty, and certainly Amnesty from the very outset was about individuals, working for individuals, and working for individuals who had been imprisoned for the non-violent expression of their beliefs. This project, the Toast to Freedom project, is something that similarly, not in legend but in actual fact, owes its origin to three of us, Jochen, Carl and myself, drinking a bottle of wine in Dublin in October 2010. And from that, and from our discussions about the role of art and the role of art in human rights and the role of artists in the history of Amnesty, that this project was born. I personally have been involved with Amnesty since the late 1970s, and in the 1980s when I was involved there were battles in Tiananmen Square. In the 2000s and in the 2011 the fight moved to the North Africa, and now it's not Tiananmen Square but Tahrir Square. And what Amnesty remains relevant for is to ensure that those who stand up and fight for freedom and who have their human rights abused because they stand up to freedom are protected and their rights are vindicated. So it remains relevant and vital and important as we head into the second 50 years of the organisation's existence. Amnesty International, in the course of its 50 years, has worked for very many prisoners of conscience who went on to become leaders in their own country. Very sadly, recently Václav Havel died, and he was a very famous Amnesty International prisoner of conscience in the 1970s, and he was the first Amnesty International Ambassador of Conscience. Another Amnesty Ambassador of Conscience is the Burmese leader Aung San Suu Kyi, and we certainly hope within Amnesty International that it won't be long before she might have the opportunity to lead her country to democracy. So although the Arab Spring gave great hope, there are very many countries in the world that still don't enjoy the freedoms that many of us take for granted, freedoms for which Amnesty International was established to fight to respect and to vindicate. And a project like the Toast to Freedom is there very much for the Aung San Suu Kyis of this world, for the Václav Havels, and for those who have their rights taken from them, to remind them that there are people in the world that care about them and that want to do something about protecting and vindicating their rights. Throughout its history, Amnesty International has relied on the support of artists, different artists, be it comedians, painters, musicians, to support its work. And they've always had a very special role within Amnesty, and they've always been enormously important in terms of Amnesty getting its message out. Whether it's the likes of U2 or Bruce Springsteen or Sting or Peter Gabriel, or artists like Picasso or Miro in the 1960s, or comedians like John Cleese and the Monty Python crew in the 1970s. Without spokesmen like those for Amnesty, those who were prepared to put their time and art and talent at the disposal of Amnesty International, it would never have grown to the strong and powerful organisation that it is today. And the Toast to Freedom project is very much a continuation of that great tradition started back in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and 90s, where artists were prepared to stand up for freedom, to stand up for human rights, and to make sure that those rights that are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights became a reality. When I talk about the role of artists and what artists have done for Amnesty, I always say that artists have very much been the heart of Amnesty. The idea of human rights and respect for laws and constitutions are important, and Amnesty exists to try and ensure that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is enshrined and is respected. But that appeals very much to one's head. It's a very cerebral idea to want to have something, a document like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights enshrined and respected around the world. But if you really want people to take an idea to their heart, if you want to take the idea of human rights, the idea of freedom to their hearts, you need art. And the role of art and the role of artists is vital in ensuring that the hearts and minds battle that is needed to fight oppression around the world is waged and won. The other important role that artists can play, and particularly young and emerging artists, is that they can help to attract a whole new generation of activists to Amnesty. Amnesty has a long, as I've said, storied tradition of support from many famous artists around the world. But if Amnesty is to tackle the many challenges it's going to face in the coming decades, it will need a new generation of activists. It will need young blood to infuse its work, and young blood to bring new talent and new ideas to the different ways that human rights has to be tackled and the human rights abuses have to be challenged in the years to come. What has always appealed to me about the work of Amnesty International is that it is about individuals working for individuals. And what is really helpful about this project is that it enables other artists to come in and join Amnesty International, and through their inspiration to get people to work together and to collaborate and to build an even stronger movement than the 2 or 3 million that Amnesty has now, so that eventually all the various members of Amnesty sections around the world can really make an enormous and a huge difference wherever they are needed. It is of course stating the obvious that the world is a far more complicated place than it was in 1961 when Amnesty International was first established. And if we are to challenge the many problems facing the world, be they problems of access to water, access to food, we are going to need to ensure the indivisibility of human rights. We're going to need organisations like Amnesty International with membership all around the world to stand up to governments and to tackle the problems that are going to be faced in the next millennium. The origin and in fact the drive for this project owes all of it to two people, mostly to Jochen Wilms and to Carlton. Carl, a friend of mine for a very long time, but it was significant that they chose to do a lot of the recording and to develop this project in Woodstock, New York, a place that's synonymous with freedom and with people prepared to challenge and to question authority. And it would be remiss of me on behalf of Amnesty International at this stage not to thank the very many people who contributed to this project, to Larry, to Bob, to Levon, Helm, to all the Woodstock crew, and just to remind people that if you want to get involved with Amnesty, if you want to help, there's always a role and there was always something for you to do. So thank you to all of those who made this such a great project.